Good evening to all our viewers and listeners. This week's section of the Torah revolves around Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah, and the receiving of the Torah by the Jewish people. The title of the Shir is Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah, Kabbalah Torah, the receiving of the Torah, pure and practical. And in order to explain basically what we would like to say, so we have to analyze a text which is very esoteric. The Torah narrates the following. After Moshe ascended the mountain, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu called to him and said, you now have to relate a message. At this point, you are incumbent, mandated to speak to the men of the Jewish nation as well as the women. Beis Yaakov refers to the women, Bnei Yisrael refers to the men. And you tell them the following, nothing less and nothing more. Here we see that the Almighty was very meticulous that this message should be transmitted to the Jewish people exactly the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu transmitted it to Moshe. So we see it has extra significance. Moshe was allowed no freedom, no poetic freedom of changing a word or adding an interpretation. He had to say verbatim what the Almighty narrated and transmitted to him. And we see very interesting verses. The first one is Atem Risem Asher Asisim Mitzrayim. You actually witnessed. You people witnessed what I did. That's referring to Kaviyachol, to the Egyptians. This was no message that was given to you. It was not hearsay. It was not from a tradition. It was not from written records. But you experienced the Exodus on a personal level. So that is the first sentence that must be transmitted to the Jewish people. Afterwards, it says, you saw how I bore you on the eagle's wings and brought you unto myself. This is the second thing that must be mentioned to the Jewish people. The eagle, says Rashi, being the highest flying bird, and therefore fearing no attack from above, carried its young on its wings to protect them from arrows shot from below. They're not afraid of anything descending from on top because they fly higher than all the birds. Likewise, HaKadosh Baruch Hu extended to Jewish people his divine protection by means of the pillar of cloud through which no missiles could pass. This is what you have to relate to them. And afterwards, the next idea, the next message, which has to be related to the Jewish people, is Ve'atem Shemaya Tishma B'Koyle, U'Shmartem Es B'Rizim V'Yisrael V'Skula B'Kol Amim V'Kol Haaretz. If you will indeed abide by the moral law, which imminently will be transmitted to you. This is the most dramatic event in history, the transmitting of the Taryag mitzvahs, basically the 10 commandments and everything else that's concomitant with the 10 commandments, the greatest dramatic act in the history of the world after creation. So if you will abide by all the laws, all the regulations, which will be formulated by Matan Torah, so you'll be rewarded. And what will be your reward? You will be my treasure. All the other peoples are meaningless to me. You, the smallest of all the nations, most minute of all the nations, will be my treasure. And the Torah, the Be'el already says, we see that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mistapik b'muat, he is satisfied with the little. Created great nations, created great things in this world, but what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu love? What is his focus on Am Yisrael, who will receive the Torah, and if they abide by the rules and regulations of the Torah, so they will become a treasure to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And you will be a Mamleches Koyanim V'Goy Kodosh. The entire world will respect you. You will be revered. You'll be a kingdom of princes, even though it says priests. But the Pharshim, the commentator, said it means princess. You'll be princes. You'll be a people that will have a holy life devoted to the service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and you'll be a great example to the human race that will bestow upon you great prestige and honor. We don't understand what is the purpose of this message being transmitted at this point before the drama is about to unfold of HaKadosh Baruch Hu giving over the Torah to Klal Yisrael. We don't understand what is the significance of this message. Afterwards, it says that the Jewish people responded to this message. And they said immediately, first Moshe obviously called the Ziknei Yom, and he repeated the words of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They transmitted the message of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Zekanim, the elders, to the Jewish people. And all of a sudden, we have one of the most famous lines in all of Jewish literature and also world literature. The Jewish people, Vayanu Kolom Yachdov, everybody said in unison, collectively, Kol Asher Diber Hashem Nasa. So this was their response. It was a message that we mentioned a moment ago that was transmitted to the Jewish people, and it had to be verbatim the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu transmitted it to Moshe. Indeed, that transpired, and the Jewish people's response was Nasa. And this requires a textual analysis. Exactly how does this follow from the message that HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent the Jewish people? Vayanu kolom yachto vayom kol asher tibel nasa. All the people answered in unison, all that the Almighty has spoken, we will do. We will comply and we will abide. Afterwards, the pasuk tells us very strange. Yoshav Moshe as divrei Yom El Hashem. Moshe, Kadosh Baruch Hu surely heard this. Nevertheless, it says Vayoshav Moshe as divrei Yom El Hashem. Moshe reported the words of the people to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, so fine. We have a complete section over here. As I say, we need to analyze it a little bit deeper. But the words are pretty clear. Vayoshav Moshe as divrei Yom El Hashem. It's as if HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to hear the response of the Jewish people through Moshe. He was the messenger, and that's the way it has to be. The messenger has to relate to the sender the message of the Jewish people. Afterwards, the Torah tells us, Vayemer Hashem el Moshe. Here, HaKadosh Baruch Hu spoke exclusively to Moshe. Hinei nechi boi lecho ba'avonon ba'vu yishmon b'dabri yimoch v'gam b'chol yaminu lo'oilom. And the Almighty said to Moshe, lo and behold, I will come to you in a thick cloud, that the people will hear when I speak with you, and then they will believe you forever that you are a Novi Hashem, a prophet of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and you are the prophet of all prophets. Question, why was this necessary as well? The commentators try to explain it. However, the next part of the sentence is totally esoteric. It's a mystery. Vayaged Moshe as divrei Yom El Hashem, and Moshe told over the words of the people unto HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Question is, It's a redundancy because it said before, even though we didn't understand it, but it said before, Vayoshav Moshe divrei Yomer Hashem, and Moshe reported the words of the people to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What were those words? Anything which HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells us, we will comply with. And those words, the Torah tells us, were reported to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the Torah tells us, Vayoshav Moshe divrei Yomer Hashem, and Moshe reported the words of the people to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it says Vayoshav. He reported. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu came to Moshe Rabbeinu, and he says he's going to appear to him in a thick cloud. That's going to be the essential giving of the Torah. And everyone will see that I speak to you. It will be perception. It will be perceived by the senses and sensibilities of the Jewish people. And therefore you will now have a credibility that will last forever, that you are the greatest of all prophets. We'll soon see what the Rambam has to say about this. But at this juncture, this is what the Torah tells us. And all of a sudden, we have something which is a misnomer. Vayaged Moshe's divrei Yomer Hashem. And here it doesn't say Vayoshav, it says Vayaged. Yaged means like Haggadah. He said over the words of the people to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But a sentence before, the Torah already recorded that. Vayoshav Moshe's divrei Yomer Hashem. So this is a misnomer. So Rashi, for example, comments and says there was a dialogue between Moshe and the Rebbeinu Shalom, which is not recorded in the Torah. The only thing which is recorded in the Torah is the answer of the Jewish people to HaKadosh Baruch Hu based on a request which is not mentioned in the Torah. Very difficult. In other words, in the text itself, strict textual analysis, we don't understand why the Torah repeated a verse that it said a moment ago. And we know it cannot be a redundancy. So that's the question. Those are the few questions we should like to address ourselves to in a very esoteric section of the Torah. So apparently, the later commentators understood that this was indispensable for the acceptance of the Torah. There was a strong link and an exceptional importance attached to the message which HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to be transmitted to Moshe Rabbeinu. And that is very simple. It was an nisayon. It was a test. HaKadosh Baruch Hu went out of his way to have a prelogue, an introduction to Matan Torah. And what was that introduction? It was of great importance. It was a test to see whether the Jewish people would now accept the Torah based on a motivation and inspiration to attain prestige, to attain stature in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and in the eyes of the world. So therefore HaKadosh Baruch Hu told them verbatim, you have seen the greatness of the miracles performed by the Almighty. And now we're holding a few moments before the drama of HaKadosh Baruch Hu transmitting the Torah to the Jewish people. And if you will abide by the Torah, you will be rewarded, not just in the world to come, you will be rewarded in this world. You will be a treasure to me. You will gain prestige, dignity, and honor by me and by all the people of the world. You'll be a holy nation. You'll achieve great things. Glory, majesty. Why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu give over this message? To entice the Jewish people that they should accept the Torah shaloi lishma. They should accept the Torah like avodim that are mishamesh as a rav al menas lekabel pras, like servants who serve the master with an agenda, not a hidden agenda necessarily. It could be it's a hidden agenda. It could be that there will be ulterior motivations, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to place in front of the Jewish people a tremendous enticement to accept the Torah due to considerations of their greatness. By abiding by the Torah, they will only be rewarded with greatness. A real test to see whether there will be ulterior motivation. So the Jewish people, when they said the words, Kol asher diber Hashem nasa, everything which HaKadosh Baruch Hu will command us, we will do. We're not even asking what he's going to command us. So in the nasa, we will do, it means without any thought, without any ulterior motivation, without any hidden agenda. We will do it out of the love of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we will do it because we want to accept the Torah the way it is and fulfill the Torah, irregardless of any reward that will be inherent in the acceptance of the Torah. We want to be avodim hamisham shemesarav shelo yamenas lekabel pras. We want to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu without any ulterior motivation. That is our inspiration, and that is our motivation. So it says beautifully by Yoshav Moshe, Divrei El Hashem. So Moshe reported this message to the Jewish people. The Sidura Shel Shabbos, classic Sefer, adds one proviso, that Moshe Rabbeinu was shakol keneged shishim ribay. Moshe Rabbeinu, as far as HaKadosh Baruch Hu was concerned, equals an entire Jewish nation. There were 600,000 neshamas. There were millions of people at Matan Torah, millions. But we have 600,000 Jewish neshamas. These are the roots, and everybody else is a branch that branches up from these roots. So Moshe Rabbeinu equals an entire Jewish nation. So therefore, insofar as the divine plan is concerned, he cannot be excluded from having a trial, a test, to see what his motivation is. Because he is shakol, keneged shishim ribay, he equals 600,000 Jews. And it's interesting how the Rambam explains this verse. The Rambam in Yisrael Torah, one of the foundations of the Torah, explains this verse. And we shall explain it, the verse of the Rambam, within the context of this being the introduction to the giving of the Torah, and it's a trial and a test to see what the motivation in the inner personality of the Jewish people and Moshe Rabbeinu really is. So the Rambam says even all the miracles that were performed by Moshe Rabbeinu, great miracles, he is not credibility, he has no credibility in an absolute sense of being the prophet of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. People believed him. He did miracles, he performed miracles, no question about it, and it was credible. But it's a nemonus, sheyesh acharei doifi, it's a type of credibility which nevertheless has a doifi, is suspicious. Because perhaps Moshe Rabbeinu learned black magic, and the reason he performed these miracles is due to his extensive knowledge of black magic. So it's not absolute. This will be the absolute proof that you're the greatest prophet of all time. So it's a test to see where Moshe Rabbeinu also has to accept the Torah. And will he accept the Torah because he also will have an ulterior motivation? Of course, the ulterior motivation is always hidden. We don't see it. Because through the giving of the Torah, the process of giving of the Torah, he will be the greatest of all Nevi'im. So Moshe Rabbeinu answered very tersely. Vayaged Moshe divrei Hashem. Moshe repeated the words of the nation to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, just like the nation accepted the Torah, no strings attached, because of love of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They wanted to be devoted to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They were not interested that they should have the great statue, a treasure by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They were not interested in all the rewards, extraneous rewards that would take place. Their love of HaKadosh Baruch Hu was such a deep love that they were ready to commit themselves to do the Torah, to fulfill the Torah, lishma, for the Torah's sake. This was the introduction, and the Jewish people passed the test that HaKadosh Baruch Hu would minister to them with flying colors. This was their greatest moment. And the question that naturally arises, how did the Jewish people, through their own motivation, raise themselves to such great heights? That when we really analyze what happened, so we're overwhelmed. It defies the imagination. So this is what we would like to speak about presently. It would appear from the Chazal that this probably was the greatest moment in humanity. It exceeds, after the world was created and populated by people, so not the drama of transmitting the Torah is the greatest of all events, but the Jewish people's relating to the acceptance of the Torah is above and beyond human intellect, defies the imagination. And this is exactly what the Chazal tell us. In the second chapter of Shir HaShirim, we have the pasuk Ketapuach ba'atzei hayal kein doidi bein abonim b'tziloi chimarti v'yoshavti u'pilyoi mosoik l'chiki. Like a apple tree among the trees of the forest, so is my beloved among all beings. In his shade I delighted, and there I sat, and the sweet fruit of his Torah was exceptionally gratifying and sweet to my palate. That is what the Chazal say. So of course this refers to Matan Torah. What do Chazal say exactly on this pasuk? So Chazal say something very strange. Ma tapuach hazeh kol baruch v'menu b'yom hasharav v'lomo l'fi she'ein lo yitzeh le'shev b'tziloi. Why is Matan Torah, why is the great event of giving the Torah concentrated, as it were, in this verse in Shir HaShirim? Ketapuach ba'atzei hayal kein doidi bein abonim. Ma tapuach hazeh, the apple tree has very small leaves, so therefore everybody who searches for shade on a boiling hot day, if they happen to be under the apple tree, so they run away. They flee from the apple tree because it does not provide shade, because the leaves are very small. Likewise, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu offered the Torah, according to our tradition, to Bnei Esav, to Bnei Yishmael, so they ran away because the Torah for them did not provide any shade. Yochel, the Chazal continue, Af Yisrael came, perhaps the Jewish people as well. This we don't understand. Those are the words. Perhaps the Jewish people as well. Talmud Leimar, so the pasuk that Shlomo HaMelech said with divine inspiration, I delighted myself, the Jewish people said, in his shade. I was delighted by it. Therefore I sat there. And the fruit of Har Sinai, of Matan Torah, was sweet and so gratifying to my palate. Unbelievable. So we have two questions the Matnas Kuna asks. How can the sages say, how can you say that the apple tree, Har Sinai, the transmitting of the Torah, this is metaphorically referred to in this verse? So how can anybody say there's no shade? The pasuk says explicitly that the Jewish people sat in the shade. So we can't have a drush, homiletic explanation of a verse that the verse says the opposite. Number two, how can Chazal say Yochel Af Yisrael came? Maybe the Jewish people as well mimicked the other nations that did not accept the Torah. Everybody knows the Jewish people accepted the Torah. Everybody knows we're the elected people, we're the selected people. Why is it called Har Sinai, Mount Sinai? Says the Gemara, because in Aramaic, Sinai is sinno, hatred. And as soon as the Jewish people rose to such great dizzying heights, accepted the Torah, so all the nations of the world immediately had a burning hatred of the Jewish nation and wanted to destroy them. And in the course of our history, there was no nation that suffered what we suffered. After Matan Torah, Churban Bayis Rishon, destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash, the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash, all the exiles, all the oppression, all the affliction, all the pogroms, the entire Holocaust, what's going on today in America, in France, in Israel. Everybody lives in danger. Why? Because we accepted the Torah. So we have no suffix, there's no doubt by anybody that the Jewish people are the chosen people. Priests say it. Catholic priests say that we're the chosen people, we're the elected people. They stopped with the myth that they now have become the chosen people. We were the ones that were kabbalah the Torah. There's no doubt about it. So what did Chazal say? Yochel Af Yisrael came. There's a doubt. We have to find that the Jewish people accepted the Torah through a verse in Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, of Pella. Answer is a very, very important answer. Why is it that the Gentile nations did not accept the Torah? Because first and foremost, they're logical people. They go with the rationale. We don't accept anything till we hear what our obligations are. So they ask Kadosh Baruch Hu, Shem Sinai Bo, Zorach Misei Olomai. He appeared to the prophets, as it were, the leaders of Esav, and they asked what's written in the Torah. So Kadosh Baruch Hu says, do not kill. So they says, we can't do that. We're not killers by nature, but we're interested in having power. And if somebody should try to stop us from overpowering them, whether it be an individual, a community, or a nation, so we'll destroy them. Why? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave everybody an instinct. And the instinct, urge, and drive, which everybody has naturally, is to have a good, enjoyable life. So Bnei Esav came to the realization that their successful, good life will revolve around power, lording over others. And should somebody try to stop them, we'll kill them. So we can't accept the Torah because the Torah is a contradiction to the good life, which our natural urges and drives demand of us, and the way we understand it with our intellect, we can't in any way have the realization of that good life without killing. Rejected the Torah. Ishmael asked as well. I told them, they cannot steal. They will always steal. Bnei Ishmael understood that the good life revolves around working. You don't have enough money, you'll steal. We will steal. We can't accept the Torah because the Torah is a contradiction to our understanding and feeling of how to realize and how to materialize a good life. So they rejected it. The Jewish people, the greatest generation of all time, the greatest people of all time, historically speaking and presently as well, ask no questions. It's impossible to understand how they didn't ask questions. What's the DNA of the Jewish people? The DNA of Avraham Avinu. How did Avraham Avinu come to Emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu? How did he come to faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu? How did he discover HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Intellectually. Mibala Biro. Who is the master of the world? Who created the world? It was through intellectual endeavor that he discovered the Rebbeinu Shalom. The DNA of the Jewish people is intellectual, rationale. Everything has to be understood rationally. And here they ask no questions. They sacrifice their intellect. Unbelievable. After they said Nasa, because Baruch Hu says we will abide by, we'll soon see why they didn't ask any questions. So the Chazal had a different issue. They wanted to understand a different matter entirely. And that is Yocholaf Yisrael Gain. Of course, the Jewish people did not run away from Har Sinai, but perhaps they were of the same approach as Bnei Esav and Bnei Ishmael. And they also held that the Torah is going to be a contradiction to the good life. Nevertheless, since they were grandchildren of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, they were elevated, exalted, because they were the children of the Avos HaKadoshim, the holy patriarchs of the Jewish people. So they overwhelmed their urges, they overwhelmed their drives, and they accepted the Torah, despite the fact that they thought the Torah is will be a contradiction to the good life. So Chazal tell us that's a gross error. That's a big mistake. Yochalav Yisrael, can you actually believe that the Jewish people had the same approach as the Goyim? Although they accepted the Torah, they didn't feel it's a contradiction? Oh, no. The Jewish people sacrificed nothing. They had a sixth sense, an intuition. They sacrificed their intellect. That's true. They accepted the Torah based on what? Based on intuition, like Rashi says in Masechet Shabbos, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu now created a world for the Jewish people. He loves the Jewish people, and that which he's giving them, the Torah, is the greatest gift that anybody could receive, that is to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and they're sure that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will not in any way ask them to do the impossible, and that's why the Jewish people accepted the Torah. Not only did the Jewish people accept the Torah with an understanding, based on their intuition, that it's not a contradiction to the good life, but they even came to a higher level that they understood that the Torah and mitzvahs and closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that is Olam Hazeh, that is this world. And therefore Chazal tell it to us in a sensuous way. Talmud Loimar, what was the Jewish response? They found the shade. The Goyim could not find shade, but in those small leaves, they found the shade of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They delighted in that shade. The Yoshafti, therefore, they sat there continuously. And the fruits of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Masayk Lechiki, they have such a sweet fragrance, such a great taste. A mitzvah is pleasure. A mitzvah is satisfying, and when we have the opportunity to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what should be our response? Period. Most like Lachiki, it's so good to do a mitzvah for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Reach nichayach lefanov. It's a great, great aroma for him. This is what Olam Hazeh is all about. This is the true pleasure, the true gratification and satisfaction, and that is the level that the Jewish people were able to reach by Matan Torah. We also are Mekabel Torah every day, and we should realize that everything else is so irrelevant. Whatever schar perhaps we could think of is irrelevant. What is relevant? This is Olam Hazeh for us, and all the great Talmidei Chachamim, Tzaddikim, in the course of the generation said they had a sweet, good life of Torah and mitzvahs. Thank you very, very much.